So then what is the strategy that is most appropriate in order to change that objective set of circumstances? It means then that we have to do something different in order to get something different. If we want public policy made in our values, made to reflect our values, then we have to make sure that there are people elected to office who are true to our values. And that might mean that we have to run for office ourselves. If the political system as it is currently structured does not allow for the authoritative allocation of our values, then we have to change the system. We have to change the structure of the system. And the structure of the system now is a two-party system. And with the two-party system, there's a mechanism of thought control and behavior control. For example, we know that the majority of people in this country would like to have a single-payer health care system. That is a Medicare for all. You have your little Medicare card, you go to the doctor of your choice, and you get treated.
Right.
Government pays, you might pay an annual subscription fee. My son went to school in Italy, and that's what he had to do every year. Along with his visa, there was the health insurance fee. And then anything happened to my son, he just goes to the doctor of his choice, and his medication is taken care of and any needs that he might have. That's the way it is with the Medicare system in this country. And you don't hear people talking about we want to dismantle Medicare because it doesn't work. Medicare does work. And so if you look at what the healthcare professionals want, they want a single payer system, a Medicare for all type system. If you look at grassroots Democratic Party activists, they want a single payer system, a Medicare for all type system. If you look at what the Democratic Party is offering, it's anything but what the healthcare professionals want and what their own grassroots activists want. Now, how could that be? How could it be that the party fails to represent the values of its constituent members? Easy. Because the party disregards the values of its members and pays more attention to the values of the special interests, like, for example, the insurance lobby. And so the insurance lobby then trumps the values of grassroots Democratic Party activists. It trumps the values of healthcare professionals. And then if you look at the health outcomes and compare them in the United States, where we spend more and get less and get worse outcomes, compare our outcomes to the outcomes of countries that have a single payer type of system, what you find is we fail on, for example, life expectancy. We fail on infant mortality. We fail on maternal mortality. Across the board, we fail. And in fact, one recent study found that that people in the United States were getting shorter because of malnutrition. There's a failure when it comes to delivering health care and when it comes to making sure that you have a healthy population. There's a failure. Healthy population can be had if we just get rid of the special interests that are blocking us. But as long as people buy into, well, I gotta vote for the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party never gives you a solution that is a common sense solution that actually is going to work, then you're stuck getting the same thing, which in the end is policy that doesn't look like your values. Well, I gave myself a birthday present last year. On March 17th, my son told me that he would never think of anybody else who would go and protest on their birthday. But I protested on my birthday in front of the Pentagon. It was freezing cold. I will never forget that day. But my present to myself was I declared my independence from the national leadership that had failed to give us a livable wage. They failed to give us a single-payer health care system. They failed to repeal the Patriot Acts, the Secret Evidence Act, the Military Commissions Act. They failed to repeal the Bush tax cuts. They had instead made sure that they supported the war and occupation. They voted to fund the war, and now, of course, we know that they voted several times to fund the war, even though they were in the majority and they could have held it up. They didn't do that. And not only did they continue to fund war and occupation, but now you've got the Democratic presumptive nominee saying that we're going to leave this residual force of troops in Iraq, but we're going to start a whole new war, a hot war in Afghanistan. And by the way, it's okay if we bomb Pakistan. It's okay if we nuke Iran. And I'm not going to say anything about the bombing of Somalia. So if you stick with the Democratic Party, you're going to get solutions, but they are not the solutions to the problems that confront our country and that the American people talk about across the dinner table.
Okay. Let's talk about the other candidates. Let's talk about the other candidates that's running and their platforms on the war. You just mentioned the Democratic platform. What is the community to do when when these are really their only, in their minds, their only choices? Is it how do they affect change? How do they demand that their values are being reflected by these candidates? Like what happens?
You say no. It's very simple. When a parent, in a very loving way, sees that the child is pushing the limits of acceptable behavior, the parent says no. Now, the voters are the primary source of power in this country, the form of government that we have, we're supposed to be. And that's why we have these elections, particularly the presidential elections every 4 years. But if you always say yes, then you get more, the child will get more and more and more and more out of hand. Now, if the child is allowed to get out of hand, then you end up with something that you would not even recognize as yours, very soon. The progressive community could look at the most recent congressional vote to extend immunity to the telecom corporations that helped the Bush administration in their illegal spying on innocent American citizens, and you could say that's the child getting out of hand. You could look at the Democratic Party failing to stand by 1 million black people who went to the polls and voted in 2000, and their votes weren't even counted. The Democratic Party gets 9 out of 10, meaning that the Democrats got 900,000 of those votes, and they allowed it to stand that those votes were not counted. That's the child getting out of hand. If in 2004, as was the case with John Kerry, John Kerry made a commitment that we weren't going to see a repeat of what happened in 2000, where 1 million black people went to the polls and their votes weren't counted. That commitment is recorded in the film American Blackout, and the very next day, notwithstanding the reports coming out of Ohio, John Kerry conceded the race. And it was the Green Party that came to the rescue, the small little party with no resources that put feet on the ground and lawyers inside the Secretary of State's office to make sure that the truth was had with respect to what happened in Ohio. It was the Green Party that did that, not the Democratic Party. And so you could say that with respect to the 2004 election, once again, the child getting out of hand. So now, how is it that you discipline the child? You discipline the child. In this case, the party, well, holding that which the party wants most. Now, you know that the party wants money, but the party's got money. It's got so much special interest money that the party probably couldn't even spend all the money that it gets. But what the party needs that money for is votes. Because on election day, all the money in the world in the bank isn't what counts. It's the number of votes that count. So basically, I decided that I would declare myself from this national leadership that also is complicit in war crimes, torture, crimes against humanity, crimes against the peace. And I didn't even realize when I was doing it the importance of the historical moment. What I later learned was that 160 years ago, 260 women and 40 men gathered in a room in Seneca Falls, New York, and they too declared their independence from the national order of the day that